Denny Hamlin says he plans to race in 2026 but needs time to get over losing the championship, and 25 Racing and Farmer Motorsports got a big win in the lawsuit. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel and welcome back to our video. We got some NASCAR and Motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just jump straight on this really quickly. We're going to start by talking about the Cup Series. As reported by the NASCAR Inside Scout, I believe on Tuesday, that 34 drivers scored a top 5 finish in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. 33 full-time drivers and 1 part-time driver. This is tied with 2001 and 1973 for the most top 5 drivers to score top 5 finish in the Cup Series in a single season in the modern era. This is a really big deal. Obviously, we know next-gen cars brought a lot more parity, brought a lot more competitiveness, also got a lot of super speedways and a ton of road courses, among other things as well, that really help on that front too. I think it's a really big deal nonetheless, and I think it's pretty exciting to see how competitive the Cup Series can be from time to time. The fact that 34 drivers scored a top 5 finish in the Cup Series this year is pretty incredible accomplishment, the most since 2001. Pretty wild and crazy stuff, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Williams. As it was announced on Monday morning that Williams will become Atlas and Williams Racing in 2026. They will unveil the logo, I believe, in January of 2026, and the new car they're going to have for the upcoming season will be revealed as well. Atlas has been a majority partner of the Williams Group for, I believe, the last couple of years, and now they'll be up in that partnership going into 2026. This is a really, really big deal. Obviously, Atlas does have a lot of money, and they've got a lot of stuff they can use to try to really grow that brand going into next year. So something like this isn't the most shocking and surprising at this point. Interesting stuff for sure, and pretty cool that they'll become Atlas and Williams in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about High Limit Racing. Now, High Limit Racing did release their 2026 schedule, and there's a couple notable things around the 2026 schedule. They will have doubleheaders with NASCAR not once but twice in 2026. They'll race at Las Vegas Motor Speedway on the Las Vegas Dirt Track, and they'll race at Texas Motor Speedway on the Texas Motor Speedway Dirt Track as well. I would expect some drivers on the NASCAR side like a Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson, maybe even someone like a Kyle Busch, or even a Ty Gibbs who did make some starts in the High Limit Series last year to potentially get behind the wheel, and even Chase Briscoe if he wants to do dirt racing again. I would expect those guys to potentially be candidates to drive in the High Limit Series in those events in 2026. I like seeing this kind of stuff, though, to be honest. I think it's a really, really big deal. I think it's, in general, is a really exciting thing, and pretty cool to see the High Limit Series will have some doubleheaders in 2026. Really like this stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the Myers Brothers Award. Now, it was announced during the award ceremony yesterday that Mike Joy has officially been awarded the 2025 Myers Brothers Award. The Myers Brothers Award is for someone in the industry, I think when it comes to media, I think when it comes to other aspects of the sport that I don't believe include driving, they go with someone who's kind of in that area. I believe that's what the Myers Brothers Award is. Say what you're going to say about Mike Joy in recent years, though. Mike Joy, in my opinion, is still one of the best commentators ever, and is a first ballot Hall of Famer without question. He's been covering NASCAR for half a century. He's been doing this since 1970, I believe. He's been involved in the sport since around that time, I'm pretty sure. And he's been around for many, many years, and he's brought a lot to the sport, brought a lot of contributions, and done a lot of great things, and is an amazing storyteller at the same time as well. He's going to go down as a legend in the sport, go down a legend in NASCAR. Congratulations, Mike Joy, on winning the Myers Brothers Award, a well-earned and well-deserved accomplishment, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about the most popular driver for 2025. As it was announced yesterday that the 2025 drivers have been revealed for each series on who's won the most popular driver award. And they're not very surprising. For the Cup Series, shocker, is Chase Elliott for the 8th consecutive year in a row. For the Xfinity Series, shocker, it is Justin Allgaier once again. And for the Truck Series, it was Rajah Caruth. I'm not shocked by Chase Elliott and Justin Allgaier. I thought Zillich was going to have a chance and opportunity to win the Xfinity Series most popular driver award, because I feel like Connor Zillich is becoming more popular than Justin Allgaier at this point. And then for the Truck Series, Rajah Caruth. A lot of people like Rajah, very popular driver on and off the racetrack. Rajah's done a lot for the sport too in recent years. And then Chase Elliott. Are we all really surprised at this point? I'm starting to feel like that Ryan Blaney and Kyle Larson, though, are becoming more popular, and I think eventually they'll overpass Chase Elliott on that front. But again, not surprised. All Chevrolet drivers all have Hendrick in some way, shape, or form associated with them. So when you're associated with Hendrick, it's not shocking, surprising to see something like this. So they're the most popular drivers for 2025, not the most shocking group for 2025 on that front, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about nicotine sponsors. As it was reported by Adam Stern late last night that among the sponsorship categories that NASCAR is known to be shopping at the moment is nicotine pouches and nicotine sponsorships as well. NASCAR is looking for some new sponsors going into 2026. Obviously, we know that Freeway Insurance is going to become a premier partner for NASCAR in the 2026 season, and NASCAR is looking to up their branding going into next year as well. Obviously, we've seen some of those nicotine pouches coming in recently. We've seen the Zyn one that Kyle Busch has, and he's had for a long time, and some of the other big name brands are starting to work with some of the teams as well. I think Colic had one, I'm pretty sure, this year. I also believe that Garage 66 has had a nicotine sponsor too in the last couple of years, because nicotine pouches are growing. That kind of stuff and that kind of branding is starting to grow in the United States as well. So NASCAR is trying to chase that at this point. And obviously they're looking to try to build up their portfolio and sponsorship, considering we got a lawsuit going on at this point, and they're trying to pick up as much sponsorship as they can, as the sport is trying to help, I think, some of these teams in some way, shape, or form get the sponsorship they need for the 2026 year, as some teams are still looking for sponsorships going into next year. We'll see what happens on that front, see if they can pick up some of those nicotine sponsorships / pouches going into next year. Going to be interesting to see what happens. We'll keep an update on the story as time progresses and goes on, and see if NASCAR can get those types of sponsorships going forward into the future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Kirkwood. As it was announced Monday morning that Kyle Kirkwood has signed a multi-year contract extension with Andretti Global and will continue driving to 27 for 2026 and beyond. The terms of the contract extension were not disclosed to the public and the media, but Kyle Kirkwood obviously has been with Andretti Global and been part of the Andretti family since racing in Indy Lights and Indy NXT, and also racing in the Indy 2000 series, I'm pretty sure, coming up. I think a lot of people know how good Kyle Kirkwood is. He had a really good season in IndyCar this year. I think he picked up 3 or 4 victories this year. And for a lot of the 2025 season, he was the only driver who could keep up with Alex Palou for a championship. But unfortunately, the second half of the year seems like the wheels kind of went off the wagons, and the performance unfortunately kind of faded as the year progressed and went on. But I think this is a great and good decision for the team and program to keep him around long term. I think Kyle Kirkwood could become the leader of this program if Colton Herta no longer being over there. And yes, they've got Will Power coming in to replace Colton Herta, who I think Will Power will become a leader of this team next year. I think you've got a really solid lineup going into 2026 with Kyle Kirkwood. Of course, you have Will Power, and then you have Marcus Ericsson being part of the program. I think this is a really strong lineup going into next year. I do like this lineup for the team, and I think that keeping Kyle on the team long term, I think that's a fantastic decision for the team and program. So really excited about this. Looking forward to see how things kind of go through for the program, and good to see that Kyle Kirkwood will be back with Andretti Global for the long term and foreseeable future. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing. Now, we're going to have a couple Kaulig Racing stories to talk about today on the channel. This one revolves around a photo that was taken. As many of you probably can see, they were, I think, at a drag strip. I'm pretty sure, not entirely sure where this drag strip is, but they were at a drag strip filming some stuff. It was Justin Haley, Brendan Butterbean Queen, and I believe Daniel Dye, the 3 drivers who have been confirmed for the full-time rights for next year. We're taking a photo getting prepared for the 2026 season. And obviously, there's a lot of stuff that is going on with Kaulig Racing currently at the moment. As many of you probably seen with the Kaulig Nation account, there's been some stuff that's been out there. We're going to talk about that Gong Show here in just a little bit. But then, of course, some rumors around Ty Dillon maybe not being back with this program on a full-time scale, maybe not being involved with it. Christian Eckes, same thing. Sponsorship stuff, among other things. But there's a lot of excitement around the Kaulig Truck program because obviously, unfortunately, the Xfinity Series program or the O'Reilly Auto Parts program no longer exists at this point. But I do think that there's a lot of things to be excited about if you are a Kaulig Racing fan. And seeing this photo should get people really excited and really happy to see. So I'm looking forward to see how this team will do next year. I think there's a lot of promise and a lot of potential with this team and program going into next year. It's definitely going to be a fun season to watch. We'll see how things go, and we'll see how fun the season is. But I do think it's going to be a fun year in the NASCAR Cup Series for the Colorado Racing team in 2026. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Days of Thunder. As it was reported by Adam Stern yesterday afternoon that Paramount is working on a sequel for Days of Thunder, and also sequel, I believe, for Top Gun as well, for around 2026 to 2027. We have talked a lot about Days of Thunder on this channel, and obviously Jerry Bruckheimer, who helped develop the Formula One movie, which I've got to say, if you haven't still seen the movie yet at this point, I suggest going and seeing it. I think it's one of the best movies, racing movies. May not be like the best when it comes to accuracy on racing, but I think when it comes to racing movies, I think it's top of the line for some of the best movies we have seen. And we haven't seen Days of Thunder come out since 1991. I think it was working on 1990. They released it in 1991. So it's been 35 to 34 years since we have seen Days of Thunder officially released. And many people have been wanting to see a sequel of Days of Thunder for a very, very long time. And Tom Cruise has been very open about having another Days of Thunder movie. He's going to be one of the people that's really helping when it comes to promoting and when it comes to getting this, producing the movie as well. I hope we do get Days of Thunder in the near future. I think it could be a really epic and really huge deal for the sport. If something like that could end up taking and getting done, it's going to be huge if it ends up happening. I want to see Days of Thunder 2 release. It'd be a huge deal for the sport. We'll see if we do get Days of Thunder 2 in the future. I think the earliest it could come out is 2027, but I think they're starting to work on that, and we should be getting it probably in the not-so-distant future. Now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Shane Van Gisbergen. Now, Shane Van Gisbergen was speaking to media during the awards ceremony weekend. Obviously, of course, Shane Van Gisbergen was there, not because he won a championship or made the Final Four, but the big reason he was there was because he was the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series Rookie of the Year. And was asked by Kelly Crandall about what he enjoyed about being in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025 and what he didn't enjoy. Well, he basically did say he wasn't sure if he would like being in the NASCAR Cup Series in 2025. He wasn't sure how the season was going to go. But then he said he's enjoyed the 2025 year. What he really said, and what surprised me, is the fact he said he actually enjoyed racing on Mile and a Half more on the NASCAR Cup Series side than the NASCAR Xfinity Series side, which I think a lot of people would say the Xfinity Series cars are definitely a lot more fun to drive than the Cup Series cars. But I also think he did say the Xfinity Series cars were fun to drive as well last year. I think for Shane Van Gisbergen, he had a very solid rookie season, picked up 5 wins this year. Yes, he only had 1 top 10 outside of the road courses this year. I think he had 7 top 10s and 6 top 5s this year. But you can tell that Shane Van Gisbergen continued to improve throughout the year. And I think he's going to be one that's going to be fun to watch going into the 2026 year, because I have a lot of confidence that Shane Van Gisbergen is going to have more top 10s on ovals next year. I think instead of having, let's say, only 1 top 10 on an oval, I think he's going to have like 5 or 6 top 10s. And if he doubles the amount of top 10s that he had from this year, which I believe is 7, he would have been a top 10 or top 15 threat in the championship this year. And he had a lot of top 15s in particular. So there was so much improvement from Shane Van Gisbergen this year. He did a very solid job in the NASCAR Cup Series when it comes to performance. Did a pretty good job behind the wheel. And I think he will only get better next year. Excited to see how things go. We'll see if Trackhouse can also continue to show improvements this year. We'll see where things kind of head in that direction for the program. But I think that it's going to be fun to watch if you are an SVG fan. I think your performance is going to start getting better. And I think the team will start working towards some really good things in 2026. Excited to see where things kind of head in that direction for next year, but I think Shane will continue to show a lot of improvement in the 2026 NASCAR season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about AJ Allmendinger. As it was announced yesterday morning that AJ Allmendinger will run the 2026 Rolex 24 and make his first start in the Rolex 24 in quite a few years. The team he's going to drive for is Meyer-Shank Racing. He will drive the number 60 car for Meyer-Shank Racing in the Rolex 24 and be teammates with Scott Dixon, Colin Brown, and Tom Blomqvist. Now, Meyer-Shank Racing also will have a second car out there for this next year's Rolex 24. They're going to have Ranger van der Zand. They're going to have Kiko Ashimura, I believe. And I believe Alex Poe and another big-name driver like Nick Yellowby will be behind the wheel of the number 93 car once again in 2026. This is some of the strongest laps that I've probably ever seen when it comes to the Rolex 24, and AJ Allmendinger is no exception getting behind the wheel. We know AJ Allmendinger is a fantastic road course guy. He's always up front contending for wins at road courses or being inside the top 5 and top 10. He, I believe, still is the winningest driver on road courses in NASCAR Xfinity Series history with over double-digit wins. And AJ's, of course, his 3 Cup Series wins have come on road courses in his career. So I think that we're going to see a lot of really good things for AJ in this event. And it wouldn't shock me or surprise me considering how strong that safety car is going into next year. I wouldn't be surprised or shocked if we see AJ Allmendinger go out there and pick up the win in victory and help that team go to victory lane. We'll see where things kind of happen, but again, I do expect that AJ is going to be very strong next year in this event. He's going to show some really good stuff. Yes, he hasn't driven a type of car like this in quite some time, but excited to see how things go for AJ. I think it's going to be fun to see what he can do in the 2026 Rolex 24. He may not be the only NASCAR driver driving in the top class. There are rumors of Connor Zilisch coming over running the Rolex 24 next year, but he, of course, couldn't do the hypercar test, which we'll talk about in just a short little bit. But AJ will get to drive for Meyer Shank. Really exciting stuff, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jimmie Johnson. Now, many of you probably saw this post on social media yesterday afternoon going into the evening. But it was reported by Jimmie Johnson himself, and he actually, if you take a look at the post, he was actually in the truck that he ran for Randy Moss Motorsports, a number 81 truck, when he made his one and only Craftsman Truck Series start. In that event, Jimmie Johnson led a bunch of laps in the race, but unfortunately got taken out in a crash in the second half of the event. Now, Jimmie Johnson, it seems like what is being insinuated here is it looks like Jimmie Johnson might be teasing a return to the Craftsman Truck Series in 2026. Now, Jimmie Johnson, of course, is now associated with Toyota, so if he is to run in the Truck Series, it would be with a Toyota. What is going on here? Could Jimmie Johnson be making a return? The fact he put out this post, I think there's a very good chance and possibility that he is going to do something like this. My theory is that Jimmie Johnson is teasing a run at San Diego. Remember, the Truck Series will be racing in San Diego, and San Diego is Jimmie Johnson's home track, as El Cajon, California is not that far away from San Diego. So I do think Jimmie Johnson is teasing a return to the Truck Series and NASCAR next year to race so that he can have the chance and opportunity to go race at the San Diego event, because Jimmie Johnson has been open to running not just in the Truck Series race, but the Xfinity Series and I believe also the Cup Series race as well. And with Tricon Garage having some association with that program, especially since Trevor Bayne made his start in their Truck Series program for Tricon earlier this year, getting a really strong run at Darlington, I think that's where Jimmie Johnson will likely end up in the event. And I think there's some big name drivers also you're going to see get behind the wheel that haven't been announced for that San Diego race too. But it's some really exciting stuff for sure. I think a return to the trucks is big for Jimmie Johnson. We'll see what happens on that front, and we'll see if things kind of go well for Jimmie to have a chance and opportunity at that. But I'd love to see Jimmie Johnson come back and run in the Truck Series once again. It'd be really interesting for it to happen. We'll see if it does happen, and we'll see if Jimmie will get the opportunity to run the San Diego event in 2060. He may not be the only driver running in those events in the 2026 year. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Brandon McSwain. As it was officially confirmed on Monday afternoon going into the evening that Brandon McSwain will crew chief for Ross Chastain in 2026, replacing Phil Surgeon. Phil Surgeon will still be with the Trackhouse Racing Team and organization in 2026, but instead of being the crew chief, he'll be going to more, I believe, an engineering role and a more of a team role going into next year. This is a move that was, of course, talked about a couple of weeks ago and was rumored basically during championship week that it was likely going to happen. And now it's officially confirmed that Brandon will be the crew chief for Ross next season. This, in my opinion, is going to be an upgrade. For those who do not know who Brandon McSwain is, Brandon McSwain had been the engineer for William Byron for a very, very long time. And we saw a ton of success for William Byron during the time that he was the engineer. Of course, William Byron has won a lot of races. I think he's picked up 15 or 16 career Cup Series wins, picked up an Xfinity Championship back in 2017. And Brandon McSwain also has been a crew chief for the Xfinity Series program at some point as well. And I think he's actually picked up the win in the Xfinity Series as a crew chief. Trackhouse Racing was needed to make some moves going into next year. They were needing to bring someone in that could really get Ross Chastain back to that level. Ross Chastain has not been a championship contender in 2 seasons since 2023 early in the year. And I feel like that they need to make a move to get this team and program back up and running where they can be really strong and really, really competitive. And I think that Brandon McSwain coming in and being the crew chief for Ross, I think that performance is going to be a lot better. And when you look at Trackhouse's crew chief lineup next year, you got Brandon McSwain being the crew chief for Ross next season. And then, of course, you have Randall Burnett, who will be the crew chief for Connor Zilisch. And I think that Randall Burnett and Connor are going to gel very well. in the 2026 year. So I really like this move. I think it's a great move on the crew chief side of things for Ross. I think Ross and Brandon are going to gel very well, and I think you're going to see an uptake in performance for the team going into next year. So excited to see how things go for next year. I'm looking forward to see Brandon McSwain and Ross work together very well. I think they're going to work very well together next year. We'll see where things kind of head for the program, but like I said, I think this is going to be a great move for the team in the 2026 NASCAR season. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Corey Heim. Now, Corey Heim, of course, picked up the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series title/championship this year after having an incredibly dominant and great season this year. But we all know at this point that Corey Heim is not expected to be full-time in any NASCAR series in 2026. And he even kind of said, is he trying to lobby a deal to race in NASCAR next year? The rumor for Corey Heim currently at the moment is that Corey Heim is going to race part-time in Cup, make a lot of starts of 20-11 racing, race part-time in the NASCAR O'Reilly Auto Parts Series with Sam Hunt if they can get a third car, but that's still on the table at this point, and then make some starts at Tricon Garage in the Craftsman Truck Series this year. And Corey Heim said he's just letting Toyota do what they need to do, and they're hoping that, and he's hoping he does get a chance to race next year, but he's just letting Toyota kind of help him on that and guide him to where he'll be racing in 2026. It really is frustrating to see Corey Heim not behind the wheel of a Cup Series car right now on a full-time basis. Him and Connor Zolch, in my opinion, are the only two drivers who are truly ready for a NASCAR Cup Series ride at this point. He is way too talented to be racing not full-time right now. He should be racing full-time. But we all know why Riley Herbst is behind the wheel of that number 35 car. Because of funding his sponsorship with Monster and his family helping him buy that charter. Basically, Riley Herbst had the worst finish of best finishes this year. Riley Herbst was only better than one driver this year in the Cup Series. And that, of course, is Cody Ware. The fact that Corey Heim is, again, not full-time in NASCAR is an utter travesty at this point. And the fact he may not be even full-time in any series next year is absolutely another travesty at this point. And I hate that for Corey because the guy is so talented. He's way too good. And we all know why he's not at Joe Gibbs Racing because Ty Gibbs is not the biggest fan of him. But he should be racing in the Cup Series right now. It's mind-boggling to me that someone this good at this point can't even get a NASCAR Cup Series seat. He should, again, be full-time racing at the moment. He's way too talented, way too good to be racing in lower series. He should be having a full-time ride at this point. We'll see how things go and progress as time goes on for Corey. Again, maybe he'll find a full-time ride and something will open up. Who knows at this point, but for Corey, I hope he does get that chance and opportunity in the future. He's way too good to not be full-time. I hope he does get the opportunity to be full-time soon. We'll see what he ends up doing in 2026. Now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kaulig Racing once again. Now, I did mention something around a potential gong show going on with Kaulig Racing a little bit earlier, but Kaulig Racing, as you probably have noticed, and Matt Weaver even mentioned this in his post, there's a lot of big name short track racers who were not on the entrance for the Orange Crush 250 at South Boston Speedway, and multiple big names are not racing at tracks across the country this weekend. I believe at National Fairgrounds also, they're not racing there as well. One of those notable names is Landon Huffman, who has withdrawn from the event. Now, why are some of these big names not there? Well, he basically said their guests are putting life by the horns, and they're going and doing something cool. When he talks about that, it is very clear they're talking about this gong show. Obviously, there's been rumors and speculation that Kaulig Racing is going to have some sort of gong show for the final truck for next year. Kaulig will, of course, have 5 full-time trucks in 2026. Brendan Butterbean, Queen, Daniel Dye, and Justin Haley have been confirmed for the program for next year. There will be another truck and a 4th truck for next year that will be an all-star truck for next year with many big names to be announced. There's been names like Tony Breidinger, Cletus Safar who have been linked over that program. There's other names that have been linked like Daniel Hemrick and Christian Eckes who be candidates for that ride for next year. But the gong show is basically meant to try to get someone from the short track scene a chance and opportunity. For those who do not remember, Roush had this kind of thing back in the 90s and early 2000s, and many notable drivers came through that program. Carl Edwards, Eric Darnell, David Reagan, Todd Cleaver came to the program. Also, Scott Riggs came to the program. Timothy Peters came to the program. I think Augie Vidovich came to the program at one point. Also, Matt Jaskol came to that program. A lot of big-name drivers were a part of that program in some way, shape, or form. And Kurt Busch, I think, also came to that program as well at one point. The Gong Show is meant to try to bring someone from the short track scene a chance and opportunity. Names that I've heard have been linked over there. I've heard Kate Brown has been over there. Carson Lofton's been over there. Len Huffman is one that I believe is confirmed. There's a rumor about Donovan Strauss being over there, but Donovan Strauss has denied he's been over there at this point. So who knows how this is going to go. But I love it. They're trying something out like this. And I think that's a big thing that we need to see. More short track drivers who may not have the most money in their pocket, but short track drivers getting the chance and opportunity to be part of something like this Gong Show. I think this could be a massive deal for the sport if this Gong Show is a success. And I really hope that we can see a lot of big name drivers get the chance and opportunity to try something like this. And apparently it's going to be good down there for a week. Whoever ends up winning this series, this Gong Show event, is going to end up taking one of the trucks next year for college. So it could go to Landon, it could go to Kate Brown, it could go to Carson Lofton, it could go to someone who's very talented and really good in this series. So we'll see how things go with this college Gong Show, but I think it's a very interesting thing to see. We'll see how things play out on that front, and I'm excited to see where it goes when it comes to this Gong Show for college racing going forward and in the future. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch. Now, we have a couple Connor Zilisch stories to talk about today on the channel. The first one revolves around the Indianapolis 500. As reported by Adam Stern on Monday evening, that Trackhouse is interested in entering Connor Zilisch into a future Indy 500. But 2026 is off the table currently at the moment as they want Connor Zilisch to get up to speed with the next gen car in 2026. I think there's a lot of people who know how good Connor Zilisch is as a race car driver. The guy has won the Rolex 24 in the LMP2 class, won the Sebring 12 Hours in the LMP2 class, had a potential career in Formula One going at one point, and Connor Zilisch picked up 10 wins in the NASCAR Riley Auto Parts Series this year, and is now going full-time Cup Series racing in 2026, so he'll race part-time in the O'Reilly Series next year. And there's been a lot of talk down the road about Trackhouse Racing entering a car in the Indianapolis 500. And I think it would be a massive deal for Trackhouse to, down the road, enter a car in the Indy 500. And Connor Zilisch would make the most sense. It's a shame it doesn't sound like it's going to be for the 2026 year. But at the same token, same time, it does make a lot of sense, right? Because, number one, Connor Zilisch is only going to be turning 20 years old in 2026. He is going to have plenty of time to get a chance and opportunities around the Indy 500. He's probably got 20 to 25 years in his racing career left, and who knows where his racing career is going to go long term. But many people think he's going to be a Cup Series champion. Many people think he's going to win 40 to 50 Cup Series races minimum in his career. And he's going to be a future Hall of Famer. Considering how dominant he was in the Xfinity Series, he could be someone that gets to that 100-win total in his Cup career. It's going to be fun to see how things go. But I would absolutely love to see Connor have the chance and opportunity down the road to run the Indianapolis 500. I think he's a perfect driver to get that chance and opportunity. And I would definitely love to see it happen going into next year. Not next year, but 2027, I should say. And again, I think it would probably be with a Honda team, though we don't even know if Honda's going to be in the sport. There could be a Chevy team out there, just saying. Penske could have a car open in the future. I know they've got 3 full-time cars confirmed for next year, but if they wanted to open up a 4th car, or Arrow McLaren get that car going, which there's some rumblings around a 4th car for Arrow McLaren, obviously it won't be Kyle Larson next year. But I think for Connor Zilisch, I think it's a really big deal that he's being considered for an Indy 500 run. I think it'd be awesome if it could happen. We'll see if it does, in fact, end up happening next year in the 27th season, I should say. Hope it does happen. It'd be great for the sport if it could happen, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Parker Retzlaff. Now, we talked about the story on the channel on Monday evening, but it's shockingly announced on Monday morning, but not completely surprising, that Parker Retzlaff will not be returning to Alpha Prime Racing in 2026 and will not continue driving a number 4 car in the 2026 NASCAR season. In a statement release, he does say that he has something that he's beginning to line up for next year and can't wait to share his plans for the 2026 NASCAR season. There's been rumors and speculation, of course, that Parker Retzlaff was not going to return to the Alpha Prime Racing team in 2026. Even Cesar Baccarello, one of the co-owners of the team and program, pretty much confirmed that he likely will not be back with the program in 2026 because apparently he has a better ride lined up for next year. For Parker Retzlaff, he had a decent season in the Xfinity Series, but I don't think it's as good of a season as many thought it was going to be. Now, obviously, Alpha Prime Race Equipment compared to Jordan Anderson Racing Equipment, I think that is a little bit of a downgrade compared to Jordan Anderson Racing, considering Jordan Anderson Racing had a car make the playoffs this year, and Alpha Prime Racing only have one car finish in the top 20 in the points. But big question we have to ask ourselves on Parker Retzlaff. Where is he going to end up in 2026? There's been some rumblings about him potentially going to AM Racing. AM Racing is a team there's been talk that they potentially could have another, it could be switching manufacturers next year. I think Parker is very closely aligned to Chevrolet, and one of the rumors is that AM Racing is going to be following the Haas factory team, even RSS Racing, over to Chevrolet next year, and they're going to have alliance to Haas factory team, and Parker Rest's name hasn't brought up as a possibility for that program. There's also some other teams that have been looked at this point. I believe Spire Motorsports is a team that still needs a driver open at the moment. They're not going to probably have a full-time driver, though, so I'm not entirely sure what's going on there. He could go back to Jordan Anderson Racing, but I'm not sure if there's going to be right opening unless Jeb Burton does go down to Spire somewhere else. There's been this rumor about Halmer Friesen Racing potentially being a team he could go to next year, which I'm not entirely sure if that is fully going to be a possibility at this point, because we're going to have 2 cars for that program next year. It's just unknown how many, they're going to have 2 cars for that program. It's just not entirely known at this point how many cars they're going to field next year and who's going to be behind the wheel of those trucks. But I think a potential candidate has to be AM Racing. I think that's the most likely candidate for next year. And of course, you have to look at Alpha Prime too. Questions around that team. What's that team going to look like after 2025? I would think that they are probably going to switch manufacturers. Rumors are they're going to be switching to Fords next year. And I would have to think more than likely you'll be seeing maybe Brendan return, but maybe not next year. Maybe Brent's got something lined up for next year that hasn't been confirmed at this point, but that is unknown right now. So we'll see where things kind of head for Parker Redsett, but like I said, he won't be back with Alpha Prime Racing next year. Again, I do expect that he will be back in the NASCAR Xfinity or Craftsman Truck Series next year. We'll see where Parker ends up going next year, but like I said, I would expect Parker Redsett to maybe have some sort of upgrade. And AM Racing is a little bit of an upgrade considering they made the playoffs with Harrison Burton this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the NASCAR Cup Series Championship once again. Now, ever since Sunday and throughout the weekend so far, there has been a lot of frustration for many in the industry when it comes to media members, fans, and people in the industry about how the championship went, not just for the NASCAR Cup Series, but also the Xfinity Series and the Craftsman Truck Series in 2025, how those championship races ended up going. And there's an article that Jeff Gluck actually put out that I thought was a really good article, kind of going after the championship format. I suggest going and checking out. I think it's one of the best articles that I think we have seen so far this year, really against this championship format. Now, Kyle Larson also made some comments on the championship format as well, where he spoke, I believe, to Ryan McGee from ESPN, where he basically says, even though I think we got a full season, I still don't feel great about the championship, and he basically went against his current championship format. So that's another driver who's completely against the one-race championship. He says, we need a bigger sample size when it comes to the championship at this point, and I feel bad for Denny Hamlin in this situation. Now, I want to say something. Denny Hamlin actually did say that Kyle Larson deserves the championship. I don't know why people said Larson doesn't deserve the championship. Kyle Larson 100% deserves the championship this year, and we should praise Kyle Larson for that. But the big reason why I think a lot of fans have been upset with the way the season ended, it's not the fact that Kyle Larson won the championship. It's the way the season ended, because Denny Hamlin was en route to winning the championship on Sunday. And then, of course, what ended up happening was that he had a late caution thanks to William Byron, which I think many would agree that caution needed to come out. I think that was the right call from NASCAR. But then Denny Hamlin's team took 4 tires while Kyle Larson's team took 2 tires, and that's what got Kyle Larson the championship. And, of course, Kyle Larson had not won a race since May, which I think is another reason why people felt like Kyle Larson didn't deserve it, despite the fact that Kyle Larson probably should have won a lot of races during that time. That Vegas race, for example, fastest car in the race. Denny Hamlin picked up the win in that event. I think, though, the biggest thing you have to look at is there were a lot of people that are frustrated with how the Xfinity Series race went on Saturday night. The fact that Connor Zolch was not the champion was absolutely ridiculous. He should have won the championship on Saturday. And then, of course, on Friday, the fact that Heim had to race for a championship, despite the fact going into the race, he had 11 wins, which he did end up winning the race. So there was a sigh of relief from the industry on that front. There's just a lot of people that are really upset with the outcome of the championship this weekend for a lot of different drivers. And I think the frustration should absolutely be with the championship. And I think there's a lot of fans who have reached their breaking point at this point. I have been a fan of NASCAR since 2007, which is almost 20 years ago. And I don't remember a time where I've seen more fans that have shown apathy, don't care, or are upset, or really angry at this point. And when you have that going on and basically fans saying that I'm excited for the offseason, that is never a good thing for the sport. NASCAR is desperately going to need to have to make some massive and major changes going into the offseason, because otherwise, if they don't go to a full season format or minimum go to a chase, I do think you're going to turn a lot of fans away. If we go to a 3-3-4 format, that is going to be a terrible move for the sport, and I think you're going to have fans that may not care. I may not care at this point for watching every single week, and I've been a fan and diehard fan of the sport for almost 20 years, and when someone like me is saying this, who's been a fan for as long as I've been, that should tell you everything you need to know that's wrong with this championship format, how awful it is, how gimmicky it is, and how flawed this system is. And again, it is not just the championship format that needs to be fixed. There's other things that need to be fixed in the sport. We need more star power in the sport. We need to grow our stars. We need to get racing better. I think there's been moments this year where the racing was solid, but I think it absolutely could have been better for sure this year. And I really hope we do work to making the racing product better, showing some improvement on that front, and getting things back on track with the sport. Because right now, I think there's a lot of people that just feel nothing. There's an emptiness from a lot of fans, and this championship format is terrible. I've criticized it way too much, but I think there's a reason to criticize it because I think the racing product right now just isn't there for a lot of fans. A lot of fans don't like the current racing product at the moment right now, and I think there's a lot of things that absolutely and desperately need to change for the sport. So if last year wasn't enough after Logano won the title, despite the fact he had a 17th-place average finish, I think a lot of fans have reached their breaking point at this point, and I think there's a lot of fans who are frustrated with the outcome of the championship and how the things ended for all three series this weekend, which I think is completely justified at this point. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Connor Zilisch once again. Now, this story that kind of went viral yesterday in regards to Connor Zilisch. Connor Zilisch actually had a test booked to do a hypercar test in Bahrain over the weekend and had a flight that was booked and ready to go for next week. But Connor Zilisch, it was announced and confirmed by, I believe, DailySportsCars.com, that Connor Zilisch will now not be able to test a hypercar in Bahrain. You want to know why Connor Zilisch is not able to do that test in Bahrain? Because he didn't have enough necessary license points to go down there. Because Connor Zilisch did not have enough FIA points. Because Connor Zilisch did not win the NASCAR Xfinity Series Championship. Because Connor Zilisch finished third in an Xfinity Series race at Phoenix Raceway in a winner-take-all championship. Connor Zilisch lost the opportunity to test in Bahrain. Now, it is worth to be noted that Connor Zilisch is still expected to test an LMDH car at Daytona, and there's a very realistic possibility that Connor could still run the Rolex 24 in 2026. But the point still stands. The fact that this championship format cost Connor Zilisch not only an opportunity after a historic season of having 10 wins this year and having one of the most consistent seasons in Xfinity Series history, 18 consecutive top fives, mind you, like Jeff Gordon 1998, the fact that Connor Zilisch didn't win the championship is ludicrous on its own. But it's also ludicrous that because he lost the title, it's not only affecting him in the NASCAR side of things, but it's now starting to affect him in other avenues. Because Connor Zilisch, like I mentioned, is way too talented to not be doing something like this. But it's not just NASCAR that's at fault for this. The ACCU and the FIA's licensing system is completely outdated. You're telling me that a guy like Valentino Rossi, no disrespect to Valentino, but a guy like Valentino Rossi who had little to no experience in sports car racing, who I believe had maybe a B or even a bronze license, got the opportunity to test a BMW. And Valentino's been amazing. There's no denying that. But the fact he got to test a BMW, a Lamborghini, is absolutely ludicrous he got the chance. While Connor Zilisch, who, mind you, has won the Rolex 24 in LMP2, has won the Sebring 12 Hours in LMP2, got upgraded to a gold driver on the FIA Saturns because of how good he is, he should have been able to have this test regardless if he won the Xfinity Series Championship or not. And again, a lot of people agree that this is one of the dumbest things, and I agree. This is one of the stupidest things that I have ever seen as a fan of motorsports in general. The fact that someone like Connor Zilisch, who is so talented and so good at everything he does behind the wheel, one of the best road course drivers on the planet for crying out loud, one of the most talented guys. There's people that put him on the same level as Kyle Larson and Max Verstappen when it comes to talent, and he's just 19 years old. What he has accomplished in his racing career should be enough to get there. And the fact that he's not even getting the opportunity to test a hypercar at this point is complete lunacy and just insanity to me. He should absolutely, without question, have no issues and no problems getting a chance and opportunity to test a hypercar right now. It's insane to me that someone this good at this point, because one, of an arbitrarily stupid licensing system that the FIA has, but also just a dumb championship in general, costing him an opportunity. NASCAR needs these superstars right now. Connor Zilisch is someone that can be a massive, massive superstar in the sport. And the fact that he may not get the opportunity, is not going to get the opportunity again, is just insanity to me. All because of a stupid, dumb, and gimmicky format that NASCAR has currently at the moment. And I think NASCAR should be ashamed of themselves that this is how things kind of went at this point. I think NASCAR needs to apologize to him and also apologize to Denny Hamlin for the outcome of how things went. But it's kind of frustrating that he's not getting the opportunity to test a hypercar. He should be getting the chance and opportunity to test a hypercar at this point right now. I really hope he does get a chance to do something like that in the future. Disappointing stuff. And again, we should absolutely be getting a chance to test a hypercar at this point, in my honest opinion. I think he should be for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode, as we're talking about the 2011 Racing and Farmer Motorsports lawsuit once again. Now, we covered a story on the channel yesterday. If you haven't checked the video, initial thoughts on it out, I suggest going and checking it out. But it was announced right before the award ceremony took place that Judge Kenneth Bell, who's been the judge overseeing the case since basically took over the case from Frank Kessler, whoever it is, he took over the case from Frank Whitney, took over the case and has been overseeing it since the end of last year. And Judge Kenneth Bell has granted summary judgment on market definition for 2011 Racing and Farm Motorsports, the market definition on stock car racing, and a being premier sponsor team series of this sport. And he also denied NASCAR's motion for summary judgment in the sport. Basically, NASCAR wanted to basically close out this case before they, of course, started talks about a potential settlement. They wanted to close out this case pretty much effectively at that point, and they wanted to basically get the lawsuit over in general. Now, basically, what is brought out there is with them removing NASCAR's motion for denial on certain aspects, like basically having the opportunity to race the IndyCar and other series, where basically Judge Kenneth Bell said, no. You can't basically put it out there like that. You're basically going against it at this point and going against the grain. And now, the big question will be, they'll be talking about NASCAR's power. If they're moving some of the market definitions on other things, what the main focus is going to be of this trial is focusing on whether NASCAR is truly a monopoly at this point and how big of a monopoly this is. This is a big win for 2011 Racing and Farmer Motorsports. And at this particular moment and point, and if you are in NASCAR's shoes, you're definitely scared right now. And if you're in NASCAR's position as well, you are desperately wanting to settle this case before trial begins. Keep in mind, we are less than 4 weeks away from the trial taking place. It takes place the week after Thanksgiving. And we're getting closer to Thanksgiving on a day-by-day basis. And the fact that NASCAR basically lost this, I think this tells that NASCAR might be in a very difficult position. Now, both sides actually did release statements as well. Jeffrey Kessler, who of course has been the lawyer from 2011 Racing and Farm Motorsports, he released his side of things, thanking the judge for agreeing with where they kind of stand up when it comes to the lawsuit, and basically saying we'll go to trial in December, and we're basically going to put NASCAR and hold them accountable at this point. NASCAR did release their statement as well by basically saying we have been the premier stock motorsport in the United States for 77 years. We will go to trial if we need to. We'll basically speak on what we feel, and we'll basically say we're not a monopoly. We haven't put on any monopolistic practices, and we'll be able to prove this in court as well. Earlier, in a couple weeks ago, I would have probably said about a month or so ago that NASCAR basically had the advantage in this lawsuit overall. But I think at this particular moment, considering how the direction of this lawsuit has been going over the last 2 weeks, and judging by the fact that NASCAR is so desperate to get this lawsuit settled at this point, I do truly believe that 2011 Racing and Farm Motorsports have the biggest leverage at this point right now. I think they are the front runners at this particular moment and point to win this lawsuit right now. And I don't think that is basically exaggeration at this point. If this does go to trial in December, they have a very good chance of winning this suit because the summary judgment being thrown out for NASCAR, other motions being thrown out for NASCAR as well, NASCAR losing their side of things on the lawsuit, basically counterclaims getting thrown out for NASCAR. I really do believe that 2011 Racing and Farm Motorsports have the biggest advantage on the lawsuit currently at the moment. Now, the other big thing to look at is there still time for settlement at this point? There definitely is. We still have 4 weeks for this before the trial takes place. And there also is a chance and possibility, too, that they could basically have the settlement done as the trial is beginning. And I think the best thing that can happen and the best course for the sport at this point right now is for both sides to settle. It would be nice if that could happen because it sounded like, according to reports that were out there, they were very close to settling back in early November, back in late October. They were very close to settling, and settlement talks were going very, very well. Basically, they agreed upon the permanent charters, which is something that 27 Racing Farmer Motorsports really want at this point. And they also agreed on basically giving them more of a say at the table on the next negotiating table. But then it came down to legal fees and the money side of things, and that's what basically held up that from getting done. And 27 Racing Farmer Motorsports were wanting to be recouped the money that they lost on the weeks that they didn't have their charters, which I will say they should probably not be recouped that money at this point because they're the ones who didn't sign the charter agreement, so therefore there. But one other thing that was noted by Judge Kenneth Bell is that the charter agreement could go away. He could actually rule on that the charter agreement could be monopolistic. If the charter agreement goes away, things are going to change, and not for a good thing. There could be a lot of splits happening, and it wouldn't be a good look for the sport. So I think right now, at this point, I think the best course of action for NASCAR and 27 Racing Farmer Motorsports is to come back to the table and settle this lawsuit. I think if we don't get to a point where a settlement is happening, I think there's a lot of bad things that are really going to happen. And I don't think both sides want that at this point. So I really hope there's a chance we could settle this case and settle this lawsuit before we go to trial. Is that going to happen? I'm not entirely sure at this point right now, but I think that's the best thing that can happen for the sport. We'll see if a settlement is reached. We'll see if it does, in fact, end up happening. I hope we do get to the point of having a settlement. I think that's the best action and course for the sport. We'll see where things go with 2011 Racing and the Farmer Motorsports lawsuit, but once again, I think the best thing that could happen for NASCAR and the sport is to get a settlement done. We'll see if a settlement does come for NASCAR because I think at this point they want to get this trial settled and they want to get this case settled before they do, in fact, end up going to trial on December 1st. We'll see if that does, in fact, end up happening, a settlement. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode as we're talking about Denny Hamlin. Now, we all know, of course, that Denny Hamlin lost the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series Championship. He was only 3 or 4 laps away from picking up that championship on Sunday afternoon, going into the evening. But unfortunately, with 2 laps to go in the race, 3 laps to go, William Byron, who was running in 3rd at the time, who was 2nd in the championship at that time, would unfortunately have a flat tire and would hit the outside wall very, very hard. They would all come down pit road. Kyle Larson's team, during that caution, would end up taking 2 tires, while Denny Hamlin's team took 4 tires, because Denny Hamlin's team thought that basically that if they knew where Kyle Larson was, where he was lining up, and basically thought they could pull a Corey Heim, where Corey Heim made it 7 wide to the inside and made a move to the inside. What I think Denny Hamlin's team failed to realize in that situation is this is the NASCAR Cup Series, not the Craftsman Truck Series, where you have a lot more talented guys in the NASCAR Cup Series than you have in the Craftsman Truck Series, or you have a bunch of young drivers who are still developing at this point. So I think that's one reason why it didn't really work. Now, many people have been asking, will Denny Hamlin return in 2026? Now, initially, you could tell by Denny Hamlin's face and reactions, many people kind of were questioning if Denny Hamlin will return to NASCAR in the 2026 year. And Denny Hamlin still says at this current moment right now that 2026 is still up in the air and it's unknown at this point. But Denny Hamlin does say that he eventually will get over it, and it probably will eventually at that point get over it, but he says it will just take time at this point. When Denny Hamlin put that out there, a lot of people were assuming that Denny Hamlin is going to pull a Carl Edwards. Remember, Carl Edwards lost the 2016 NASCAR Cup Series Championship in very heartbreaking fashion. And I feel like Denny Hamlin losing the championship the way he did, it felt very similar to 2016. And then in early 2017, Carl Edwards would announce retirement. And I think that a lot of people are thinking that Denny Hamlin is going to walk away and retire from the sport because of how the outcome of this championship ended up happening. But I think what a lot of people do need to realize is while, yes, Denny Hamlin probably doesn't want to get behind a wheel of a race car at the moment, the championship just has ended like 2 days ago. It's been only a little over 48 hours since the championship ended. In fact, when the interviews were happening, it hadn't even been 48 hours. It had been like 40 or 41 hours. Denny Hamlin has still had to do some stuff with the championship. He still had to be there for the award ceremony. And Denny Hamlin, you can definitely tell, is still a little bit agitated with the way the season ended. Now, if Denny Hamlin does come back in 2026, which I would expect Denny Hamlin to return next year, will Denny Hamlin have that same drive and have that same push? I think it's definitely possible for sure. I think Denny Hamlin is potentially going to want to go on a revenge tour next year. I wouldn't be surprised if Denny Hamlin goes into next year and has a 5 to 6 win season and contends for a championship again, depending on what the format is. But I do think that's another thing to look at too, why Denny Hamlin is probably not going to retire. NASCAR is going to have a new format in 2026. We will not see the one race championship once again, and we don't know what the format is going to be at this particular moment in point right now. And I think there's a lot of unknowns on that front, what it is going to look like for 2026. I think many people, including myself, absolutely 100% do want to see the full season format come back. I think that in 100% without question is the best way to crown a champion in the sport. But if we go to a chase, I think Denny Hamlin will stick around, and Denny will probably put a big effort into it. If we go to 3-3-4, I think Denny Hamlin's going to leave. I don't see Denny Hamlin sticking around for 3-3-4 format at this point because he does have a 2-year contract that he is supposed to honor. But it's been stated by many, and I agree with a lot of people saying this, that contracts can easily be broken. If Denny Hamlin doesn't like what he's seen on the track and isn't a big fan of what is going on, and I think this lawsuit's going to play a role into that unless, of course, they settle. And I do think, of course, what kind of format comes in will be a big decision if Hamlin sticks around. But the thing is, I don't think anybody's ready to kind of come in and replace Denny Hamlin. Sure, you could get someone like a Corey Heim to get behind the wheel, but we know that Corey Heim is probably never going to end up being in a Joe Gibbs racing car because Ty Gibbs does not like Corey Heim. They're not big fans, and Joe Gibbs can be very, very petty about his drivers and his grandson especially getting messed with at this point. I think Denny Hamlin isn't going to go anywhere next year, though. I think he sticks around, but I'm not sure if he'll have the same commitment going into next year. And I also want to touch on something really quick as well. There's a lot of people that felt like that, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people probably felt like that Kyle Larson didn't deserve the championship, despite the fact he got the most points. Denny Hamlin even said, speaking to the media yesterday, that he basically went to Kyle Larson's championship party. He went to the after party after it happened. He said he didn't stick it around too long, but he said he went to congratulate Kyle Larson on winning the championship. And he said that he is still really good friends with Kyle Larson. And he said that Kyle Larson, without question, does deserve the championship at this point. And people questioning it is definitely unfair. And I think I agree. I feel bad for Larson's situation as long as Denny Hamlin because I think Kyle Larson is a deserving champion this year. And there's a lot of people that are questioning Kyle Larson winning the championship this year. And I got to be real and honest, I hate that for Kyle Larson because both of his championships he would have won under the full season format in 2021 and 2025. He's the only driver in this type of championship format, by the way, who would have won 2 championships, whether it was under the full season format or under the current playoff format that we have. Larson is the only guy that can say that at this point. And let's just say this, if Kyle Larson, and I guess you can say it's revenge for 2024, because Kyle Larson was the best guy of last year and should have won the championship without question last year instead of Joey Logano. I don't think we should be questioning this championship as much as other championships. For instance, I have seen a ton more reactions against how the Cup Series championship ended than basically how the Xfinity Series Championship ended, for example. I think the Xfinity Series Championship is way more egregious, and I think Stillage getting screwed out of the hypercar, for example, it is way more egregious on that front than Kyle Larson winning the championship this year. Larson is without question 100% deserving of the championship this year, and Larson deserves that respect at this point. But I get why fans are upset, and I get what people are saying. But again, I don't expect Denny Hamlin to retire. I don't think Denny Hamlin's going to be going away anytime soon. It won't be like FedEx leaving last year. Denny Hamlin won't be going anywhere, in my opinion. I think he'll stick around in 2026 and continue racing. But we'll see what happens in a couple months. I think there's certain factors that basically will determine how long Hamlin races in the sport. And I'm not sure if Hamlin will have the same commitment next year. So, that's going to today's long NASCAR news and motorsports news episode. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications on, so that if I win a video, it does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support me on Patreon as well. Let's go below that and comment your thoughts below on today's video. What are your thoughts about Denny Hamlin's comments from the awards ceremony? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about the lawsuit updates? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If any major news breaks later today, we'll discuss it live on the channel. Tomorrow on the channel, we're going to be ranking every single full-time Cup Series driver from this year, go from the worst to the best this season. And then, of course, tomorrow on the channel, we are going to have, and on Friday, of course, we will likely have a NASCAR news video dropping on the channel. Then Saturday and Sunday, we will be doing the rankings of every single race in 2025. And then the first 2026 video will be released. We will be doing the winner, not the winner predictions, but the drivers watch out for 2026. We'll have that video coming out as well. We got a lot of content coming on people like Haley Deegan, Shane Gisberg, Carl Edwards, Kurt Busch, Kyle Busch, Bubba Wallace, Ross Chastain, Sheldon Creed, Sam Merritt, Frankie Muniz, Eunice, Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Ryan Preece. Team previews should be coming out starting next week as well, and a lot of other fun content for 2026 will be coming very soon as well. We got other content coming, people like Haley D and SVG too, and Will Brown, Brad Finney, Cam Waters, Eric Almirola too. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's episode. I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content, other motorsports content on the channel like this. Also, the content on Daniel Suarez, Brad Keselowski too, and RFK Racing as well. Take care, everybody.